That's an important point, that when you shift from mouth to nasal breathing during sleep, you're actually learning and training your system to breathe properly. And when I say learning and training your system to breathe properly, what do I mean? Let's put some scientific and mechanistic meat on that. We already talked about the phrenic nerve, this nerve that innervates the diaphragm and that allows for the lungs to fill up because of the movement of the diaphragm. What we didn't talk about, however, were the brain centers that actually control the phrenic nerve and control breathing. Knowing about these two brain areas and what they do is extremely important. So there are basically two areas of the brain that control breathing. The first is called the pre-Buttsinger complex. You don't have to worry about the name so much. Just know that it was named after a bottle of wine and that it was discovered by the great Jack Feldman, who's a professor of neuroscience at the University of California, Los Angeles. This is one of the most fundamental discoveries in all of neuroscience in the last 100 years or more, because this brain area that Jack and his colleagues discovered controls all aspects of breathing that are rhythmic. That is, when inhales follow exhales, follow inhales, follow exhales. That's all controlled by a small set of neurons in this brainstem area, so around the region of the neck, called the pre-Buttsinger complex. And we really owe a debt of gratitude to Jack and his colleagues for discovering that area, because it's involved in everything from breathing when we're asleep to breathing when we're not thinking about our breathing. It may have a role in, that is, when its function is disrupted, it may cause things like sudden infant death syndrome. Believe it or not, it can explain in large part many of the deaths related to the opioid crisis, because exogenous opioids like fentanyl and other sorts of drugs, which are opioids, obviously, bind to opioid receptors on that structure and shut it down. Now, keep in mind, these neurons are designed to be incredibly robust and are designed to fire inhale, exhale, no matter if we're awake or aware, unaware, or asleep, to keep us alive. Exogenous opioids like fentanyl and drugs that are similar to that can shut down that structure because it's rich with these opioid receptors. So it binds to that and it shuts off the pre-Buttsinger complex, which is the major cause of death of people who die from opioid overdoses. I think a lot of people don't realize that. They think, oh, the opioids must shut off the brain or shut down the heart. No, it shuts down breathing. In any event, pre-Buttsinger complex is controlling inhale, exhale patterns of breathing. The other brain center controlling breathing, again, through the phrenic nerve, right? It all converges and goes out through the phrenic nerve and these intercostal muscles, is the so-called parafacial nucleus. And the parafacial nucleus is involved in patterns of breathing where there is not an inhale followed by exhale, inhale followed by exhale. That is, it's not rhythmic, one then the other, but rather where there is a doubling up of inhales or a doubling up of exhales or a deliberate pause in breathing. So inhale, pause, exhale, pause, inhale, pause, exhale, pause, this sort of thing. A little bit later, we'll talk about a pattern of breathing called box breathing, which has very specific and useful applications, in particular for adjusting anxiety. And in that case, it involves going from rhythmic breathing of inhale, exhale, that is relying on the pre-Buttsinger complex neurons, to reliance on the parafacial nucleus neurons. And box breathing, just to give away what's probably already obvious, is you inhale, hold, exhale, hold, and repeat. And that pattern of breathing, even though it's rhythmic in nature because inhales precede exhales, precede inhales, and so on, there's a deliberate breath hold inserted there. So anytime we're taking conscious control of our breathing, the parafacial nucleus is getting involved. Now, you don't have to assume that the parafacial nucleus is the only way in which we take conscious control of our breathing. We can also take control of the pre-Buttsinger complex. You can do that right now. So for instance, you are breathing in some specific pattern now that, unless you're speaking or eating, no doubt is going to involve inhales followed by exhales. But you could, for instance, decide that, yes, inhales are active and exhales are passive, but now you're going to make the exhales active as well. So rather than just inhale and then let your lungs deflate, you could inhale and then force the air out. That's going to represent a conscious taking over of control of the pre-Buttsinger complex. Okay, so the reason I'm giving this mechanistic detail is A, it's super important if you want to understand all the tools related to breathing. B, it's actually a pretty simple system. Even though the areas have fancy names like pre-Buttsinger or parafacial, it's pretty straightforward, right? You have one area that controls rhythmic breathing, inhale follows exhales, and the other area which gets involved in breathing anytime you start doubling up on inhales or exhales. In fact, the parafacial nucleus is the one that you're relying on while you speak in order to make sure that you still get enough oxygen. It's also the one that you will use if you incorporate the physiological sigh or box breathing. And frankly, most of the time you're using both of these circuits or these brain systems, parafacial and pre-Botzinger, in parallel. Again, biology loves parallel systems, especially for things that are so critical that if we didn't do them, we would die, like breathing. And so it makes sense that we have two different brain structures that control this.